You know, the most striking truth about the reality bender is that they don't convince you that they are right. They convince you that you are unreliable. We usually think a lie is just a way to hide the truth, right? But in these high-pressure dynamics, bending reality is actually a tool. It's used to exhaust your brain until you literally can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not. So why is it that the very person who claims to care about your health so often ends up being the one who makes you feel like you're losing your mind? And that right there, that's the core paradox of the reality bender. It's that exact moment when your own memory, your own senses, are turned into the very things you're taught to fear. So today, in this explainer, we're diving into a topic that's, well, it's deeply unsettling, but it is absolutely crucial. We're talking about epistemic sabotage. We're going to break down the mechanics of how reality can be systematically twisted, not to win some argument, but to make a person doubt their own sanity. All right, so here's our roadmap. First up, we'll look at the unreliable target. Then, we'll get into how confusion is manufactured. After that, we'll break down the three-step pattern they use. Next, we'll talk about the controller's goal. What's the point of all this? Then, the really important part, the awareness audit. And finally, we'll wrap up with reclaiming autonomy. Let's get into it. All right, Section 1, the unreliable target. And the subtitle here is key. The goal is not persuasion, it's destabilization. So let's start right there with this foundational idea. In the dynamic we're looking at, the objective isn't to convince you of something else. This is not a debate club. The real goal is way, way more fundamental. It's to destabilize your very perception of reality, to make you believe that your own ability to see, to hear, and to remember is just broken. And this really gets to the absolute heart of it. The goal is to nudge your brain into misinterpreting all this manufactured confusion as some kind of personal mental decline. See, it's about creating an environment that is so full of contradictions that your mind, which is just desperately trying to make sense of it all, eventually concludes the problem, well, it must be me. Now, a really crucial point before we go any further. What we're talking about here are observable patterns of interaction. This isn't about diagnosing anyone's character or intent. We're simply exploring a mechanism. Okay, so Section 2, manufacturing confusion. Let's look at the mechanics of doubt. So how is this state of confusion actually built? I mean, this isn't just random chaos. No, it's a process with very specific mechanics, and they're all designed to methodically, step by step, create doubt. The main term for this whole process is something called epistemic sabotage. Okay, let's break that down. Epistemic has to do with knowledge, how we know what we know. So this is, quite literally, the sabotage of your ability to know. It's the systematic calibration, almost like fine-tuning a radio, where your own perception gets slowly adjusted until it matches the frequency of someone else's authority. Your direct data, what you actually see and hear, gets replaced by what the source calls narrative saturation. It's kind of like being stuck in a room where only one radio station comes in, and it's just playing the same story on a loop over and over until that story feels like the only reality there is. So this whole process is designed to create a very, very specific feeling inside of you. I mean, have you ever been in a situation where you start to feel like your own mind is a broken instrument? Like a compass that's just spinning wildly and you can't trust it to point north anymore? That's the feeling. That is the intended emotional and cognitive outcome. And that feeling, it actually has a name. Cognitive vertigo. It's that disorienting, dizzying sensation when your own judgment, your memory, even your gut feelings just feel unreliable. And this isn't just being confused, no, it's a much deeper loss of trust in your own mind. The world itself starts to feel unstable because the very tool you use to navigate it, your brain, feels broken. And the slide here, it illustrates the really fundamental shift that happens. You go from active perception, where you see for yourself, you're an independent observer, to passive interpretation. And in that passive state, you stop trying to figure things out on your own. Why? Because it's just too exhausting. Instead, you just wait. You wait for the simplified narrative, the official story that's going to make all the confusion go away. And this is the really sobering endpoint of that whole process. The person who's been targeted, they're exhausted, they're desperate for clarity, and they eventually just beg the other person to explain the truth. Think about that. They're asking the very person who's creating the confusion to resolve it for them. In that one moment, they're basically handing over the keys to their own consciousness. They're outsourcing their reality. All right, Section 3, the three-step pattern. This is how reality gets rewritten. Let's look at this whole process a bit more deeply because it often follows a very predictable, systematic three-step pattern. And understanding this pattern, that is the absolute key to being able to recognize it. So here are the 3 steps. You've got the micro-lie, then the emotional inversion, and finally, the reality overwrite. You can think of it like a cycle, right? Denial triggers doubt, and that doubt then triggers submission. Let's break down each one. First up, step 1, the micro-lie. It always starts small. The person will deny a tiny, verifiable fact. Something super simple, like, I never said that, when you both know they absolutely did. But here's the thing. The point isn't even the lie itself. It's partly a test, but more than that, it's just about wearing you down. Over time, people report that the sheer exhaustion of having to constantly check and defend basic facts just makes it feel easier to agree. Your energy gets completely drained on these tiny little battles. Okay, step 2 is the emotional inversion. So what happens when you try to push back against one of those micro-lies with actual evidence? You pull up an email or a direct quote. Well, the whole conversation gets immediately flipped on its head. The focus is violently shifted away from the fact and onto your state of mind. You'll start hearing things like, wow, you're being way too sensitive, or you're remembering it wrong, or the big one, are you okay? You seem kind of unstable. Suddenly, the discussion isn't about what happened anymore. It's about your sanity for even daring to bring it up. And that brings us to step 3, the reality overwrite. So after going through these cycles of micro-lies and emotional inversions again and again, the target is at a breaking point. They're confused, exhausted, and just filled with self-doubt. And right at that exact moment of vulnerability, a new cohesive story is offered up. And guess what? In this new story, the target is always the one at fault. Their bad memory, their oversensitivity, their instability, that's presented as the real reason for all the conflict. And the brain, just desperate for relief from the confusion, often latches onto this new narrative because, hey, it's simple and it makes the pain stop. The end result of this repeated cycle is a conditioned state, and it's called epistemic dependency. This is where your brain literally learns to associate trusting yourself with conflict, with pain, with chaos. Self-trust becomes the danger zone. On the flip side, compliance, just going along with the other person's story, becomes associated with peace, with harmony, and with the feeling of being sane. It's an incredibly powerful form of behavioral conditioning. Okay, section 4, the controller's goal, which is all about monopolizing consciousness. So what is the underlying psychology here? Let's dig into the motivations behind this pattern and figure out why it works so damn effectively on the human brain. So a key vulnerability this whole process exploits is something called System 2 exhaustion. Now, in psychology, System 2 is our slow, analytical, effortful brain. It's the part that solves complex problems and weighs evidence. But, and this is the crucial part, that system runs on finite energy. It's like a phone battery. And constant contradictions are biologically exhausting. They just drain that battery. So when your System 2 is depleted, your brain defaults to seeking what's called cognitive ease, basically the path of least resistance. And that simplified story you're being told, it offers exactly that. This slide does a great job of showing the conflicting drives that are at play here. On one side, you have the controller's motivation, which is described as total epistemic monopolization. I mean, the goal is to be the only reliable source in your life. And on the other side, you have a really deep-seated human vulnerability, our need for social harmony. So many of us are wired to value belonging more than we value being right, especially in relationships that matter to us. So this dynamic basically pits one person's need for total control against another person's need for peace. And this quote, wow, it just perfectly captures the end result. The person's internal monologue completely shifts. They stop asking what happened, and they start asking what's wrong with me. And that is the exact moment the goal has been achieved. The monopoly is complete. Okay, section 5, the awareness audit. This is about reclaiming your data. So now that we understand the mechanism, let's pivot to what is, I think, the most empowering part of this whole discussion: how to actually develop awareness. And this isn't about gearing up for a fight. It's about reclaiming your own data and achieving what we can call analytical sovereignty. And there's a really calm 2-step analytical process for this. First, it's about what's called reality anchor awareness. And second, it's conducting a fixed point audit. Think of these as tools, okay? They're tools for your own self-clarification, just to help you understand what is really going on. So let's talk about these reality anchors. What are they? Well, they're objective external points of data that aren't influenced by emotional pressure. We're talking about things like your own written records, journals, emails, or photos and video evidence, even public records. And a really big one is getting an unbiased observation from a neutral third party. So the fixed point audit is simply the process of using these anchors. It's the private act of taking the story you're being told and comparing it against the hard data from your reality anchors. Now, this is absolutely crucial. The point of this audit is not to gather evidence so you can go win an argument. You're not building a court case here. The goal is entirely internal. It's for you to recognize that the confusion you're feeling isn't a sign that there's something wrong with you. It is a perfectly normal biological response to a totally abnormal environment. Your brain is working just fine. It's just being fed bad data. And that brings us to our final and honestly most important section, reclaiming autonomy. Because your mind is private territory. Look, awareness is the critical first step to interrupting this entire cycle and, finally, reestablishing trust in yourself. When you boil it all down, it comes to this really simple but incredibly powerful affirmation of your own direct experience. You saw what you saw, you heard what you heard, that is your data. And it is valid all on its own. It doesn't need to be validated by the very person who's trying to invalidate it. It is enough. You know, the source material on this suggests that the entire cycle gets interrupted at the exact moment a person reclaims their right to their own perception. Just choosing to trust your own senses, to stand by your own data, even if it's just in the privacy of your own mind. That is an act of profound power. That's what breaks the dependency. That's what reestablishes that your mind is, and always should be, private territory. And this right here is the ultimate takeaway. Your sanity is not a subject for debate. Your internal state, your perception, your sense of what's real, these are not up for negotiation. And just recognizing that is the primary tool you have to make sure that nobody else's story ever becomes a cage for your own mind.